Hey guys, welcome back to another video with Mrs. Hill. Today I'm going to be showing you how to write decimals as fractions. Decimals and fractions are ways to write parts of a number. So behind me here I have some examples of fractions. I'm just going to place them on the number line here so you can see how they match up. Very simple, these are all tenths. 3/10 is written as 0.3. And we know as a decimal, we read this as 3/10. The number or the place right after the decimal point is the tenths place. So if we were to match up all these fractions and decimals, 1/10 is the same as 0.1. 2/10 is the same as 0.2. 3/10 is the same as 0.3. 4/10 is the same as 0.4. And you can see the 0, that's the wholes place. So we have 0 wholes and 4/10. Let's continue on and finish this. 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 9/10, and then we obviously have 1 whole, which can be written as 1.0, or it's also the same as 10/10. This is known as an improper fraction. It turns into a whole number, where the top number is bigger or equal to the bottom number. So it's a quick picture of equivalent fractions and decimals. Let's look at another way to show a fraction and a decimal. Look over here, we have a little hundredths grid. This is a grid of 100 squares, a 10 by 10 grid. Here we see a picture of 7 squares that are shaded. So this is 7 out of 100, which can also be written as 7 over 100 as a fraction, or 7/100ths as a decimal. So remember, the first place after the decimal point is the tenths place, and the second number is the hundredths place. So 0.19 can be read as 19/100ths, and as a fraction, that would simply be written as 19 over 100. Okay? Similarly, if you had 53 over 100 as a fraction, that would be written as 0.53. Because whatever the last digit is, that's the place that you put it in. So since this is the hundredths place, the 3 has to go in the hundredths place. These are a few examples of equivalent fractions and decimals. Why don't you see if you can match up the decimal number to the fraction over here. Pause the video, match them up, find the matching decimal to the fraction, unpause it, and we'll check when you're finished. Okay, let's take a look. So 17/100ths. Hopefully you match it up with this number right here. This is 17/100ths. Let's review real quickly why these are not 17/100ths. So this one would be written as, or read as, 17 and 1/10. So that is not 17/100ths. This would be read as 1 and 7/10. So that is also not 17/100ths. This would be written as, or read as 71/100ths. Not the same thing. Okay, let's take a look. 28/100ths. Hopefully you chose this number right here. 0 and 28/100ths. So this is 2 and 8/10. Not the same thing. This is 20 and 8/10. Definitely not the same thing. And this is 1 and 28/100ths. Okay, which one of these decimals did you pick for 31/100ths? Hopefully this very first one right here. This is 31/100ths. Let's read these really quickly. This is 1 and 3/10, 13/100ths, and 1 and 31/100ths. All right, and this last one, 53/100ths, would be matched up with this decimal number right here. 0 and 53/100ths would be written like this. This is 5 and 53/100ths. This is 5 and 3/10. And this one, how would you read that? 5 and 3/100. So all of those are different numbers. All right, so let's look at what are the rules? How do we write decimals as fractions? And one thing I do want you to be able to do is write a decimal as a fraction and then simplify it. So write it in simplest form. All decimals can be written as a fraction with a denominator of 10, 100, 1,000, or some other base of 10, some other multiple of 10. Because all decimal numbers are base 10. If you think about it, this is a tenths place. This is a hundredths place. This is a thousandths place, and on and on. So if we have a number like 0.8, the way we would write that is 8/10, because the 8 is in the tenths place. Now that is not in simplest form. We haven't talked about simplest form yet this year, but I know you've done it in the past. Simplest form is when you ask yourself, what can I divide both of these numbers by? What number can go into both 8 and 10? And I want you to think of the greatest common factor. So the biggest number that you can think of. And in this case, it would be 2. So if I divide them both by 2, it would reduce to 4/5, okay? So if you can, I do want you to simplify your fraction. So 0.8 as a fraction in simplest form is 4/5. Hopefully you see that. Make sure you're writing these examples down, guys. In your notes, I should see these 3 examples written down tomorrow. So 3.6 can be written as a fraction as 3 6/10. Why is 10 on the bottom? Because the 6 is in the tenths place. Now, that also is not in simplest form. We can divide by 2, and that would give us 3/5. And I want to point out something we haven't seen so far. We've seen here we have a whole number. Any number to the left of the decimal is a whole number. And we write that as a big number to the left of the fraction. So my final answer is 3 3/5. One more example for your notebook where you practice. 4.02, okay? We know to read that, we would read it as 4 wholes and 2 hundredths, because 2 is in the hundredths place. So we would write it as 4 and 2/100 this time. The bottom number, or the denominator, is 100 because our 2 is in the hundredths place. All right, let's simplify it. We can, again, divide by 2. If I divide by 2, I would get 1 on the top for my numerator, and 100 by 2, that would be 50. Let me bring over my whole. So my final answer is 4 1/50. So these are a few examples of how to write a decimal as a fraction. And again, I do want you to try to put them into simplest form. Okay, let's look at a few more together. I want you to, again, write these down. We're going to now try to change these decimal numbers into their equivalent fraction, and these are all in simplest form. Okay, let's start with this one right here, 0.3. Well, we know that 0.3 is read as 3/10. And if 3 is in the numerator, 10 has to be in the denominator, so that's a pretty easy one. 3/10. Here's our first match. Okay, let's look at this one. This is a 2 in the tenths place. So I know that this would be written as 2/10 as a fraction. When I look over here, I don't have 2/10 as a choice. And that's because this isn't in simplest form. 2/10 can be divided by 2, and that would give me 1/5. So there is my match. 2/10 is actually the same as 1/5. Let's move them up at the top there. And I hope you see that. It's because it's the same thing as 2/10. In fact, I'll write that up so you can keep that in your notes. 2/10 is equal to 1/5. All right, let's take a look at this one. This is a pretty easy one, 7/10. And 7/10 cannot be reduced. So there's my next match. 7/10. Here's another one, 5/10. Now I know normally I would write that as 5/10 because the 5 is in the tens place, but there is no 5/10. Hope you see it. it can be reduced. You can divide by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 10 divided by 5 is 2. So 5/10 is the same as 1/2. Here's my next match. And again, I will write that as 5/10 as well, so you can add that to your notes. Okay, we got a few more decimal numbers over here. Let's see if we can find the rest of these. Look at this one. A 3 in the hundredths place. Now that's not too hard. That would be 3/100. So here's our match for that one. 3/100 is already in simplest form. This one, 18, and the 8 is in what place? The hundredths again. So this is 18/100. Now I do see this one over here, although, what do you notice? You're right, this is not in simplest form. So they didn't give us the simplest form of this one. We can reduce this. Again, we can divide by 2, and that would give us 9/50. So 18/100 is equal to 9/50 in simplest form. Let me move all those up here. Move these down here, we haven't done those yet. So 18/100, which is also the same as 9/50. All right, just 2 more here. So we got 0.25 and 0.75. And I don't see either one of those numbers as a fraction right away. But I do notice that 0.25 is 25/100. And I notice that that can be reduced. What is the greatest number you can think of that goes into both 25 and 100? Hopefully you're thinking 25. 25 can be divided by 25, and that gives me 1. 100 can be divided by 25, and that gives me 4. 25 out of 100, that's like a quarter. 1/4 is the same thing as a quarter in simplest form. So 0.25 is the same thing as 1/4. And again, I will add that for your notes, that originally it was 25/100. Similarly, this last one, as you can imagine, 0.75 is the same thing as 75/100, which, as you guessed, in simplest form, has 3/4. I can divide by 25 again, and I will get this last fraction, 3/4, by dividing by 25. All right? So let's practice on our own now. I would like you to try to write each of these decimal numbers as a fraction in simplest form. I want you to simplify. Pause the video, unpause when you're finished, and we'll go over your answers. All right, let's go over these and see how well you understand how to change decimals to fractions. Hey, I'm pink. This is pretty cool. Okay, you're going to have to deal with me being pink for a few seconds. Okay, so 0.6. 0.6. If we read that correctly, that is actually 6/10. Did you write 6/10? If you did, you're on the right track, but you forgot to simplify. This can be divided by 2, which would give us 3/5. If you got 3/5, give yourself a pat on the back. 2 and 8/100. Now this was written out in words, so let's write that down as a decimal. 2 and 8/100 would look like this. As a fraction, that would be a big 2. The 8 goes in the numerator, and this is in the hundredths place. So 100 would be in my denominator. Now I'm running out of space here, so let me move this over. You can have all this in your notes. 2 and 8/100 can be divided by, what can it be divided by? Hopefully you divided it by 4, although you could divide by 2. Maybe you thought of 2 at first, but we can actually divide by 4. I'll show you both scenarios. If you divide by 2, you would get 4/50, and then you might realize you can divide by 2 again to get 2/25. So your final answer for this one is 2 and 2/25. 25. Now what I could have done right here is right away divided by 4. 8 divided by 4 is 2. 100 divided by 4 is 25. So your final answer, sometimes it takes a few times of reducing before getting to the final answer. Okay, here we have a harder one. 4 and 37, what? Well, let's break it down. That's the tenths, that's the hundredths. So this is the thousandths place. So to write this as a fraction, I would have a big 4. 37 is my numerator, and 1,000 would be my denominator. Now think about that. Can you think of any numbers that can go into 37 and 1,000? And there isn't, because 37 is a prime number. There's no numbers that go into 37 evenly other than 1 and 37. So that is your final answer. Hope you're checking your work. Right, last one was a word example, real life example. Most packaged cookies have a diameter of 1.75 inches. Express that diameter as a fraction. Okay, so if we read that correctly, that is 1 and 75 over 100. And we just saw this example on the last page. 75 and 100 are both divisible by 25. Maybe you first divided them by 5, but I hope you see that the greatest common greatest common factor is 25. So if we divide them both by 25, we get 1 and 3/4. That's your final answer. How'd you do? Okay, bring all these notes and examples to class tomorrow, and we will practice changing decimals into fractions some more, and then also we'll learn how to change fractions back to decimals. See you tomorrow.